They want to be able to say things like Russia collusion and perpetuate hoaxes and then have people like us be silenced. They want to be able to advocate for COVID lockdowns. They want to be able to advocate for school closures, things that are not supported by the evidence, but then when you speak out, they want to stifle dissent. And so we reject this bureau in the state of Florida.
About 2 months after Republicans declared war on Joe Biden's Orwellian power grab, and just a few weeks after the so-called Disinformation Governance Board was paused, it has now been apparently completely scrapped. According to the Democrat Post, quote, Department of Homeland Security advisors urged the agency Monday to scrap the Disinformation Governance Board that the Biden administration created this year, only to watch it implode amid confusion and partisan quarreling over its role. Of course, in typical fashion, they're trying to somehow diffuse the blame and, as usual, transfer it to the Republicans for what they call partisan quarreling. It's just like anytime the Democrats step in it and the Republicans point it out, the media frames that as pouncing or seizing on. The truth is, we're talking about a group that chose Nina Jankowicz as its leader. The two main reasons that the entire thing imploded is one, because a whistleblower told us all about it, and two, because Nina Jankowicz's burning partisan hatred for Republicans and conservatives was exposed. Quote, a Homeland Security Advisory Council subcommittee concluded in a one-sentence draft recommendation that there was, quote, no need for the Disinformation Board, and the council endorsed the recommendation at its meeting.
You're a terminated fucker.
Officials said they created the board in April to fight disinformation-fueled extremism that might endanger national security. But Republicans and conservative media portrayed it as an Orwellian tool that could infringe on privacy and free speech. They are still defending this shit. It was just gonna fight extremism online.
Again, at the kernel of that criticism is the idea that this board would be policing speech, which it wasn't going to do.
But as I pointed out in another video, Nina did quietly mention patrolling speech online to, quote, stop mass shooters.
And then I think another example that's important, that's also within the department's portfolio, especially given the events of the past few weeks, is that disinformation plays a role in radicalizing people to violence. You know, we're seeing continued mass shootings here in the United States, and in many of those cases, violent extremism is begotten by things people see on the internet. So that's the sort of thing that we would be looking to address.
That is, in fact, an Orwellian tool that could most definitely infringe on your privacy and free speech. And of course, all the people that are defining this term extremism are left-wing Democrats. These are people that think it's extremist to oppose open borders or drag queen story time. It doesn't take a conspiracy theorist to deduce who their targets of this extremism would be. The public section of the meeting was held via audio only. Officials did not identify all members on the call or respond to questions afterward. The council had a quorum and approved the recommendation in a voice vote. For such a non-threatening, totally not Orwellian threat to your privacy and free speech, they sure are secretive and afraid of transparency. They won't even answer basic questions under oath.
Your name is on a memo with Mr. Silvers dated September 13th, 2021. The subject is organizing DHS efforts to counter disinformation. This is the memo that recommended the establishment of the Disinformation Board. It was turned over to me and to Senator Grassley by a whistleblower. I have to tell you, we've had the darndest time getting any information about this board out of your agency. We've asked and we've asked, members of this committee have asked. We would know virtually nothing had it not been for this whistleblower who turned over a tranche of documents, all of which are now public. So since I have you here and you wrote the memo, let me just ask you a question or two about it. Whose idea was it to establish this board?
With respect to this internal working group, there were discussions about the need to ensure that there were guardrails in place across the department to protect civil rights and civil liberties and privacy. And as such, there were discussions about creating this internal working group.
Well, yeah, all of that I noticed is in the passive voice. My question is, whose idea was it to set up the? And you use the word working group, but I noticed that that's not at all what the memo says. It doesn't call it a working group. The directive that Mr. Mayorkas eventually signed off on does not make this board a working group. It had managerial authority, it had directive authority, all of that's in these documents. So let's please not go back to those tired and now disproven talking points. Whose idea was it to establish the board? Was it yours?
Senator, without going into internal deliberations of the Department of Homeland Security, there were a series of discussions among personnel.
Who?
I'm not going to go into the internal deliberations of the department.
Why not? You're under oath.
I am under oath, sir. That said, these are internal deliberations at the department. It was a working group, sir.
Does the charter call it a working group?
I don't recall the charter.
No. The answer is it does not. So was it your idea to establish the board?
As I testified, Senator, under oath, the establishment of the working group was a decision taken, a conversation that was had among multiple individuals at the Department of
Okay,
Homeland
so you're not going to answer my question.
But hey, at least this department is officially gone, and we're not going to have to worry about it anymore. Right? Right? Except it's not really gone. It's just being taken over by the Democrat Party government's propaganda arm. So-called National Public Radio, which only represents the far left, have now announced their own disinformation board. What could go wrong? Wait a minute, let's just take a look at who's gonna be on this so-called disinformation team. Shannon Bond needs little introduction. Shannon is currently a tech correspondent based in the Bay Area. The Bay Area, you say? A very Democrat left-wing area. It's also a favorite spot of the CCP to deploy their spies. You may have heard of a couple of their targets. Strange how they always seem to go after Democrats in the Bay Area. In any case, a quick search of Shannon Bond shows she's your typical left-wing activist in the media, who promoted the disinformation that Hunter Biden's laptop was not a real story.
You know, it's maybe the biggest decision that Facebook and Twitter have made so far about what content they limit on their platforms. This is all about a New York Post story that's based on supposed emails from Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son. And there's lots of questions about the story, including whether these emails are real and how they were obtained by the Trump associates who gave them to the Post. There's just a lot of rules now about trying to stamp out misinformation and these conspiracy theories. And make no mistake, there are real threats on social media right now. The Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee had a hearing about this today. Here's what Nina Jankowicz, who studies Russian disinformation, told them.
Oh my God! Why is it that leftist activist types that hate Republicans and conservatives always get put into positions like this? It's obvious that these folks will only ever find disinformation coming from their political opponents. It's not like this is even baseless speculation, because NPR has proven over and over again to be spreaders of disinformation. For example, NPR's own managing editor straight up said they wouldn't report on the Hunter Biden laptop because it's a distraction. Even after the story was confirmed to be real, NPR continued to lie, falsely claiming, quote, it was discredited by U.S. intelligence and independent investigations by news organizations. Once again, spreading disinformation. NPR painted Smollett as a victim, up until a year later when he was convicted. They wrongly characterized innocent kids as racist aggressors, ignoring all the video evidence because a few of them had MAGA hats on. They spread disinformation about the Jacob Blake shooting, framing it without evidence as a racial unjustified shooting, which led to riots, that they then spread even more disinformation about, claiming they were peaceful. Of course, even when they knew they were spreading disinformation about hands up, don't shoot, which also led to riots, they tried to rationalize it as true because it had been repeated so much. These are the people who think that they can dictate to the rest of us on behalf of their party's government from a place they call public media what is and isn't factual information. All right, that's another one in the can. I hope you hit that like button, share this video, and let us all know what you think about NPR's announcement in the comments. Thanks for watching.